Welcome to episode 54 of Upshift, no direction network podcast that gives you an edge on Essence 20. I'm Ryan Costello, one of the designers of the Essence 20 system, and an author on the G.I. Joe Transformers My Little Pony role-playing game core rulebooks, as well as many other Essence 20 projects from Renegade Game Studios.
And I'm Charles Cushman, and I'm on a journey to dig into the nitty-gritty details of the Essence 20 system and tap into Ryan's expert knowledge to get the most out of the game.
Before we begin, although I have worked for Renegade on Essence 20, this is not an official Essence 20 podcast and is not associated with Renegade Game Studios.
Nailed all of that. Well done, us.
Yay! Speaking of well done, your push for more engagement and interaction with the fans has really been working out. And David, who kind of crosses the line from fan to, person we game with on a regular basis now and will eventually be in the Energon Chronicles podcast. It'll be a while, but he did eventually join the cast. But he did post a comment in some video. I did not write down which one, and I could not find the comment, but I know it exists, where he was requesting an episode doing a deep dive on the Ranger role. Now, I like the idea of doing role analyses. The Ranger's not the one I would have started with, but I did write it, and it was a role that I wrote with like a specific purpose in mind when I started. So it's actually a very good place to start, even though in the logic of looking at what role to start with, it may not be the obvious one.
Well, it is obvious because Rangers lead the way.
Yeah, all right. Yes, they do. Well done.
In the song.
What is this song? You made a reference in our show notes, and I do not know which one it is.
So it is a cadence song. It is one of the songs that they use for marching, but the only way I know it, or the way I knew it, was from, I believe, The Breakfast Club, where he just runs along the lockers and is trying to get the attention of the principal. And he sings, "I want to be an airborne ranger." And of course, that also is when we first see Beachhead in the special missions. He's singing that to himself, which is kind of funny because that's what he is.
Wow. So I've definitely read that special missions and I've seen The Breakfast Club. Neither of those clicked.
All right. Well, it's a very interesting song in that I only hear the little bits of it, but if you listen to the details of it, it's actually gory and scary and interesting. So a little bit of homework for anyone who's there. Oh, it's a marching song.
All right. So you've written up the outline for this episode. So where do you want to begin?
Let's talk about what a ranger is. And immediately I think Lord of the Rings when I think ranger.
Okay.
The idea in a lot of the RPGs is that the ranger represents a fighter with the skills to adapt to a specific environment outside of a city. So someone who would prefer to be in the forest to being in the city and doing city things. In the military, they're light infantry. They're organized into small independent units who they're given a lot of latitude on how they can accomplish their mission. They're told, do this thing, and then these are, some general rules of engagement, and then they go forward and do the thing. And they were known in the late 70s and early 80s for long-range reconnaissance, LRRPs, which is long-range reconnaissance patrols, which, of course, we saw in the comic with Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow and Stalker out in Vietnam doing these long-range patrols.
I don't know if they ever name it Vietnam. I think we're all supposed to assume.
Oh, yeah, that's fair enough. I see Huey helicopters with guns in the door, and I just immediately start hearing Fortunate Son.
Of course.
And
Vietnam had the best soundtrack.
It really did. U.S. Rangers are highly trained, highly intelligent, and chosen for stability and people skills. And I know this because I have a friend who was one, and he told me all of this. And it's a very interesting way of selecting people for social adjustment, not just for their military skills. So we're talking about people who fit in wherever it is that they go and do an excellent job of doing that. And so I think that takes us to how does G.I. Joe represent the Ranger as a character? We have some very notable Rangers. Tell me a bit about that.
Yeah, so there's a couple of them that are specifically called out as Rangers on their file card. Stalker being the first one, Beachhead being the second. And I don't know if we got any others that were explicitly a ranger, but as far as the role playing game is concerned, we also looped in anyone that was environmental specialists. So, by our definition, Snowjob and Frostbite are Arctic Rangers, Dusty is a Desert Ranger. And I think we even threw Shipwreck in there, but he's not a great example. He's our example Beastmaster, which is also not great, but it's the only way you can really get a parrot as smart as we see Polly in not just the cartoon. Polly also is fairly smart, the one special missions that we see him in the comic. So, shipwreck aside, our general definition was character that is defined as a ranger or an environment specialist. So it is in keeping with how Dungeons and Dragons defines the class. A lot of the GI Joe roles have, other than the technician and the casters, there's a lot of parallels between Dungeons and Dragons classes and the niches that our roles fill. And the Ranger's the most obvious one, to the point that it even has the same name as the D&D class. Although, because of, like you were saying, all of the military history, we couldn't not include a Ranger role in the GI Joe role-playing game.
Not people that you want to tick off, frankly. That's
As opposed to infantrymen,
you probably have a
officers.
better chance there. Don't take off a ranger or marine. They know where you live. So, and yeah, there's I think a lot of history with how both Stalker and Beachhead were kind of treated as very important characters. I know that you've talked about how Stalker was kind of Larry's self-insert character to talk about various different pieces. And so you see that particularly with Stalker, very intelligent, knows many languages, very astute, very able to make social observations and understand his place in the universe. So we're talking about some smart guys who can adopt to some really important things. And well, talk about how the Ranger is done in Essence 20.
All right, so the a lot of the elements you were just talking about, we will get to. One of the
Oh,
focuses that was a focus option that was introduced later does cover the diplomatic side of being a ranger, but from the get go, the ranger was focused on the environment, and that was yeah, that was the the marching orders. That was the design goal. But specifically, when I approached the ranger, the first thing I wanted to do was to solve the Aquaman problem. So the
mhm.
Aquaman problem is when a character specializes in a niche, and then the GMs never want to put them in their niche because they dominate, but outside of their niche they're useless, and it's just this push and pull between player and GM of how much of that niche the GM has to impose on the campaign. And depending on the niche and the campaign in mind, it can completely either derail a character concept or derail a campaign. A zombie hunter in an undead campaign, for example, is like you're just gonna kill half the encounters. And there's a lot of characters in fiction that I could specifically call out, but the reason I go with the Aquaman reference is because there was a comic strip parodying the Super Friends in an issue of Wizard magazine. And there's one panel where Aquaman says like, "I'll just hang out here in the background until water is introduced to the plot." And so that is what I wanted to avoid. I didn't want the person that was playing the ranger to feel like, well, it's not an Arctic mission, and so I'm just going to stand here holding my skis and wait until I can find a time to use them. So the way I solved this was, first of all, I narrowed the gap between when you are at your most useful and when you are, out of your element. Because the ranger overall is a pretty competent competent role. The it has speed and smarts essence is its combination of its two best essence scores, which is a really powerful combination of essence scores. All of the skills in each of those essence scores are highly useful and specifically geared for the ranger. Speed will give you targeting. It will give you finesse if you want to go the melee route. It will give you initiative, which is just a generally positive skill. It'll give you driving if you want to be frostbite, and it gives you infiltration if you want to be recondo. So really, other than acrobatics, having a high speed is really beneficial in the game and really helps with the idea of ranger builds. And then smarts, likewise, alertness and survival are really the ranger's thing. And then if you also want to throw in some science and be a medic, or culture if you want to be a diplomat, like there are a lot of ways that the ranger benefits from its two essence scores. In fact, that might be the most powerful combination of essence score progressions that a character can start with in Essence 20.
That may be a topic for a whole thing we could talk about. But anyway, I heard the words you got marching orders, which it doesn't actually sound anything like the rest of the Essence 20 build process, where it was very Wild West.
Oh no, I didn't literally get marching orders. Just
Oh,
I
okay.
knew that when I was told you're designing the ranger, I knew what was expected of the ranger.
Fair. Well, what elements of the Ranger did you? You've covered over a bit of what they have. What were the elements that you absolutely thought it needed to include?
So that's I will get to them, but just because I
Oh, okay.
thought you were transitioning into guide, which is a marching orders type of perk, I figured we'll just cover that because we won't really have a great place to do it otherwise. But your be a hero perk is guide. So we've talked a little bit about be a hero was originally supposed to be something that the reason that these be a hero perks are separate from the way the other perks are presented is that originally they needed heroism to fuel them. Heroism or hero perks
Hmm.
being the G.I. Joe version of PowerPoints from Power Rangers or Energon from Transformers. Um, we in the designing never fully committed to what a heroism point was versus a story point, and so at some point it was just like, let's just generalize it, it's just story points. And the formatting never changed, so the be a hero perks are still separate and given their own little section, but mechanically they work the exact same way as any other role perk, except they are more likely to need a story point to activate. But guide is you may spend a story point to allow your allies to ignore rough terrain in your environment of expertise. So what is good about that is you were talking about how rangers tended to be their own units, and the reason that that works in real life is because they all have similar training, and so they all how to progress, know how to traverse different terrain equally. Whereas in a role playing game, where if everyone is playing the same role, that's really boring and redundant. So you really only expect to have one ranger in the party or in the squad. But then anything we give the ranger that lets them ignore difficult terrain only makes them as far away as they are willing to get from their party. So by spending a story point, you give the whole party the same ability to ignore difficult terrain for 1 minute, and 1 minute is the generous one because we don't expect GMs to actually count minutes. We just know that it's like if we say 1 minute, then just know you don't have to worry about this for a while.
Yeah, I like that. Pay one story point, not to be the first one to get shot.
Exactly. Or not to be like, wow, look how fast I'm going, and now watch me stand here and completely deplete all that advantage I just had while everyone else catches up to me.
Oh, all right.
All right.
So do you want to, where do you want to go next?
Now we'll go to environmental expertise. So
Okay.
this is one of the two biggest perks that you get. This defines what kind of ranger you are. And we've got a list of environments here. And you'll see sometimes we get a little more granular, like wetlands, and sometimes it's broad, like just, I don't know, all of the Arctic is covered with one specialty, which is probably actually pretty accurate. This is just one of those things where I put together what I thought was a succinct list that covered basically white rangers, yellow rangers, which are the desert rangers. Blue rangers would be the water based rangers. Nothing to do with Power Rangers. Just happens to be that the action figures were released in single solid colors. That tended to mean that they were some kind of environment specialist. And then yeah, in like the feed backgrounds, it's like, oh, but what about this? Like if you say you're good at the sea, does that mean you're also good in the swamps? So it got a little more granular and a little less like cohesive, but I still think that it's a pretty solid list of like when you build your ranger, you will have an idea of where you want to fit in. And obviously there are some that will come up more often, but actually I was worried about putting urban on the list. We'll just take a
Hmm.
second to say that urban is one of the ways you can be a ranger, and this is really if you want to be an alley viper, if you want to be like it's more like I was picturing it more like a blown out city. You know the urban jungle. You know how to navigate this. You know what went into the building of a city and how to get around it in the same way as any other ranger. And I was worried that was going to be the one that comes up the most often. But in my experience now, having written adventures and played in several campaigns, I realized that no, the urban isn't necessarily a setting. JoJo is a world spanning adventure, campaign or you have world spanning adventures, and so changing your environment often is part of the expectations for the stories. And so, no matter which one you choose, you will never be too long inside or outside of your area of expertise.
Yeah,
Uh,
excellent. Immediately when I look at the list, everything except for grasslands, I can think of a GI Joe that answers that, right? That has that expertise. Um, I can't think
Maybe
of one
hit
for
and run.
grasslands.
No, he's a
Maybe he's
mountaineer.
mountains, right?
Yeah.
So he's got a big hook and a whole thing full of cord that gets tangled around things. That
Well,
says
you've got
mountaineer to me.
Stalker version 2, the Prairie Ranger.
I think he was an Arctic Ranger. I think he came with a kayak, didn't he?
He did, but I think he specifically called out as some kind of prairie or plains or something. But you're right. Grasslands is not even picturing it like, yeah, no, like it's not nearly as exciting as any of the other ones.
There was one that a foreign figure that came with a lion,
Okay.
and I think he would definitely fit under the grasslands kind of thing because that's where lions live. I don't. I'm stretching here. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So moving on to what the advantage of being in your environment of expertise is, you get three advantages. You get to ignore any penalties for rough terrain. So that's just straight up, you are always moving around in your environment of expertise fluidly. You never have to worry about any of the penalties. You gain an edge on non combat skill tests in your environment of expertise. So, again, like for the navigating of your environment when you're outside of combat, you are just maximizing your rolls. It's just, you are just comfortable, you are good in your environment. And finally, you gain additional benefits. Oh no, sorry. The other thing is that all of your attacks in your environment of expertise are considered specialized. I This one I probably would have gone with an upshift, or maybe I even would have gone an edge. It's a bit of a weird thing because now it penalizes you if you actually do specialize in attacking. Um, Although it does save you the skill point, and ranger, because of the need for survival and alertness and a couple of other skills to be the best at what they are even without these advantages, maybe I would still keep it like this. But in general, I don't like, after the JoJo Core rulebook, I did not tend to do the roll as if specialized as one of the ways to represent how good you are at what you do.
It definitely feels like a very strong advantage because it gives you effectively two or three, depending on what your gear loadout is or what you're attempting to do. It's like having a couple of additional essence points to be able to put into those things. And that sounds, well, for a person, or sorry, a role who is specifically designed to be versatile, I think that feels pretty good. They're good at everything.
Hmm. And then they get better because at ninth level you get and 18th level you either get an additional environment of expertise. So this is keeping Stalker in mind once again. His second one was an Arctic Ranger, even though the first one was a Jungle Ranger, and later he had more urban ones. So if you want to be the Ranger who's just good at whatever environment you're plopped into, then you can go that route. But just in case you had a picture in your head, like Snow Job is not going to suddenly also be Mountain Job. Like he's got snow in his name. He's committed to the Arctic shtick. And so, if you do not want to take additional environments of expertise, you get exposures. And exposure is what we'll talk about next, and then we'll loop back to adaptation. So, exposure is it makes the ranger the most customizable role just based on its role perks, because the majority of the perks you get are just called these exposures, and they are customizable ways that you improve and narrow down how manage your environments. So it's anything from if you are a vehicle driver, then your vehicles also gain the advantage of your expertise, which means they ignore difficult terrain and they get bonuses to skill tests in your environment. You can get an animal companion. You can improve your armor. You can improve your weapons. There's the medic route, the lookout route. Basically, picture a ranger, picture the role it could fill in the party. You will have multiple different ways to express that so that as you level up and gain more of these exposures, you can double, triple down on that one niche, or you can go broad and be like the useful in any situation type of character.
Can I talk about my favorite one of them all?
Yes.
Dirty Trick.
Oh, that's a
Um,
very specific one. Almost so specific it almost got gut.
it is, well, the thing is, though, that having played a character that focuses on stunning the big bad every turn, being able to do a specific skill test that you're probably going to have a few points in against a target's willpower, and you get to blind or stun them for one turn or knock them prone. All of those things can really turn the tide of a battle. You can take on things which are much stronger than you are and really have them just kind of lying there while the rest of your team just, curb stomps them. And that is, it's the first thing that I gravitated to after, having an animal pet, which is always fun, is being able to just take out the big bad and let your team do the rest of the work. It's an incredibly powerful skill.
I don't know if it was inspired by Predator or if it just also happens to really fit with Predator, but like that is the kind of jungle warfare that I'm picturing. And it's like, or Return of the Jedi with the Ewoks taking on the Empire. They mostly outwit them more often than they defeat them in straight combat. Although they also do that, they beat them to death with rocks.
Well, it's called asymmetrical warfare, and it's been, in place for a very, very long time. But there's always a way that somebody with less resources and more clever can, take a good chunk out of the people with more resources, and so that feels very on brand.
So I said we would circle back to adaptation. So adaptation is something you get at second level, and I really wanted to give it at first level, but it was front loading the role so much that it got bumped to second level. But adaptation is a pool of adaptation points. It's a free action. You can spend an adaptation to use your environment, your environment expertise, or your exposure benefits outside of your environment of expertise. So this was largely inspired by my friend Jean had a character in a Dungeons and Dragons campaign named Ranslar Vega. He was from the Dennis Lam Desert. And he would always tell stories of like, back in the Slab Desert. And then he would contextualize something he'd learned about the desert. And Jean did a lot of research about how people survived in deserts. And then he would apply it to that situation. And that is exactly what I'm seeing here. That like, yes, snow job might be very good in the Arctic, but that means he's good at like going without for a long time. That means he's good at, recognizing or navigating certain types of terrain, slippy terrain, whatever, things that you would find outside of just the Arctic. And so by looking for what's familiar and what you recognize with your area of expertise, then when you apply it to other environments, you gain the same benefits. You never get too many points. I am very stingy when it comes to giving players resources. I don't like it when I then play a role that was designed with my same philosophy and it's like, I need a couple more of these adaptation points. Why have I been so cheaped out on? It's a contradiction that I have to live with. You probably could use a couple more every level, or at least early levels get a couple more and then max out at 6 or 7 like it does on the list. But I think this was the most important perk for solving the Aquaman problem. So even though it's not as important as environmental expertise or environmental exposures, it makes the role work.
Yeah, we talked about something similar when we were talking about driving. And it came up again with the shark having the Namor solution to the Aquaman problem. We're definitely and I say this because I've been handling a lot of GI Joe figures very recently, and it's the Arctic ones that are always nice, crisp joints because they weren't played with very often. Anything that was really, really tied to a specific environment didn't get the general play, at least in my household, that
Oh,
everything
in
else
my
did.
house, I remember them getting really rusty rivets because we actually took them out in the snow.
Philistine. Okay. But yeah, the limited utility of somebody wearing a parka, despite the fact that you can have somebody wearing that parka in a desert themed snow cat thing, is really it is prohibitive. So this being able to make sure that they are able to be functional in other environments and not get to use all their toys, or at least one or two of their toys, even when they're not in their preferred environment, really does, I think, make them more fun to play.
Speaking of toys, forage. So forage is just for fun. That when you are out in an environment, you can spend 10 minutes roll survival, and it's like making a requisition test. And as you go up, what you can requisition increases. So you could start by getting kits. Oh no, sorry. You start with standard kits. You can eventually get limited kits and restricted kits. So the best example is like you need to just put together a first aid kit or put together a splint, and so you just find some reeds and some long, thick grass, and you use that in place of the kit that you would need. And likewise, like if your vehicle has overheated, you can find coolant or a coolant like solution or windshield wiper type solution just by spending the 10 minutes and looking around. And then there are some environmental exposure. And anyway, there are some exposures that let you use this to build yourself weapons, build yourself, I think, armor. If not armor, that's easily something that someone could make. Yeah, I did not give them an iron environmental armor. Huh, that's something like, well, you know that gap at the bottom of the page with the environmental exposures kind of bugs me. And had I just come up with environmental armor, that's something that we could have put in that gap. Or, in the proper spot alphabetically and shift everything down. And then that's it. Other than general perks, that's it for the Ranger, which always surprises me, even as the person who designed this role. The fact that it has so few but recurring perks, I always like feel like, oh no, where'd the rest of the Ranger go? Did we accidentally not print half of this role? Nope, it just then repeats, and just the level of customizability within all of the options that you get um, makes it feel like it makes it a more robust role than the number of unique perks you get might imply.
And a lot of them are very useful. There are some that are of marginal use or very specific use in other classes. Most of these are fairly universally functional in the way that the games go. I was going to talk about the particular one that you have for being able to go out and scavenge specific things. That's really good for a certain type of campaign. We were talking about how survival horror was really
Mm-hmm.
give them very limited resources. And having someone who, in their element, is able to get more resources is extremely helpful in those type of scenarios. And I think that that is a very interesting place to take Essence 20 games because oftentimes you're getting everything you need. The GM gives it to you in the requisition phase. You ask for it, either get it or you don't. Having very limited resources in an Essence 20 campaign definitely changes things and makes that a very, very strong candidate for use. As well, they can be, they can be medics. They can just do all sorts of things that make them general utility. So it's even with perhaps a shorter number of pages than other ones, it is a lot of utility, it is a lot of options. So I agree. The customizability, I think, makes it a desirable class
And
role.
what's funny is that now that I've designed multiple role, like I only designed 3 roles for the GI Joe core rulebook, and then I designed, or I basically designed all of them for Transformers, or at least in the core rulebook, and then I designed them for My Little Pony. So now I have over a dozen roles to my credit. But at the time when I only had 3, like this made sense. Now I would be less inclined to do something that breaks the mold of how a role works. Um, and you know what? To the detriment of the game, I do feel like this, like being a fresh-faced rookie to the system, making something that I didn't know what the mold looked like yet. The Ranger still stands out.
Mhm. And yeah, not everything has to follow the mold. There has to be one or two things that work a little bit differently so that you can appreciate what the mold is. And I think that this really is designed around with enough flexibility right off the bat. If you're doing a low-level campaign, it's a really good choice. I mean, it is a good way. It might top out. Never seen a high-level one played yet, but at low levels, it's a very, very effective thing. Very easy to build as well. So, can we talk about the focuses then?
Yeah, let's talk about the focus options. So right out of the gate, you get Beastmaster, Predator, and Scout. I think covers very well the three pillars of what someone going into the Ranger role would probably expect out of it. So Beastmaster is the one that gets pets. It's the one of the only ways that you can have more than one pet in the system, and you can either improve your pet or gain additional pets. There's I don't Oh, well, now in the classified line, there are some characters that have multiple pets. Nagahide, on top of his warthog, got a monkey. So he is one of the rare examples of somebody that would be potentially a Beastmaster, although Nagahide in most other ways, I think, would be a Predator, which I like the two ways you can take a human hunter.
Yeah, I look at Beastmaster, Predator, and Scout, and I'm like, I didn't see the movie Scout, but
Ah, there must be a movie called Scout.
there must be. But so I immediately what comes to mind for me on Beastmaster is Crocmaster, because he never has
Yep.
just one crocodile.
Oh, that's
He
true.
always has a few. So, and he's more powerful when he has more crocodiles.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and then I don't think we have to go through every single focus perk of the Beastmaster. It's pretty much what you would expect. They gain advantages in your environment of expertise, and you synergize well. So, no matter how many animals you get, you become like a unit within your unit, within your squad.
And there's
Pre-
always in video games, that's a very popular template. Somebody who has a lot of, we used to call them charmy armies, where you have a bunch of different things that do the fighting for you, and you kind of sit back and direct them to where you want them to go. So if that type of gameplay appeals to you, this is a good type of role for that.
And that does then, if you just max out your animal handling, that frees you up to not have to worry about your combat skills, and you can instead focus on other elements, other areas that you want to focus on, because you've got combat covered with your, bear or whatever animal you've gone with.
Or your group of bears.
Sure,
That's a
Goldilocks and the
terrifying
three
character.
bears.
Oh, nice. That absolutely is an essential build.
Hold on, can we get up to three? Um, I think you max out at two, maybe three. Anyway, I could make the Puss in Boots version of Goldilocks.
Ooh.
Hmm. All right, Predator. Predator is one of the focus options where you, there's no multi-classing in Essence 20, but every now and then a focus is basically multi-classing, and this is if you want it to be a Ranger Rogue. So it gives you advantages for sneaking, it gives you sneak attack, and oh yeah, it gives you like different kinds of movements you can get around. It really is the commando slash ranger focus
And how is it different than the commando class? Or sorry, the commando role?
because it's narrower. You do not sneak attack as well. You do not sneak as well. You don't get a lot. Just you get a couple of the like big role perks that the commando gets, but a lesser version of it. And you don't get a lot of the little ones like expertise. A lot of the stuff that the commando gets that makes it keep pace with the other roles. You're not getting that because you're not two roles in once. You are a ranger. You just have commando tendencies. Oh, there, environmental armor. This is a role perk for them. No, sorry, a focus perk. So that's why I didn't make it an exposure. Although
Ah,
it's not foraging for armor. It is, yeah, no, it's just giving yourself a bonus to defenses.
hiding behind a tree.
Exactly. All right, so the scout, we have to address a couple of things. First of all, the chart says at level 1 you get lookout, and then if you read the stats, there is no lookout, but there is somewhat a perk called recon. Yeah, that was just an editing thing. I don't know at what point the name got changed, but it did not get changed completely. And so lookout and recon, they are the same things. I don't know why we went with one and not the other. I think recon's the better of the two and suggest going
Mhm.
with that. There is also a problem with the mechanics of recon. Oh, in my turnover, you got an upshift on this list of skills. They changed it to an edge. The problem is that you already get an edge in these things thanks to environmental exposure, and extra edge doesn't give you any advantage. It's basically you get no advantage based on how it's written. So I suggest going back and going with the upshift as it was originally written.
Right.
Scout is basically if you do not have a idea for your ranger beyond I want to be a ranger, grab scout. You get twice the number of adaptation points, and everything is generally applicable. Um, I did just want to make a quick reference to the other two focus options because as of Factions and Actions Volume 2, all roles have the same number of focus options, which something has not been true since Sergeant Slaughter came out, which is the first book that came out after the core rulebook. So core rulebook had 3 for everybody. Then Sergeant Slaughter had 3 specific ones, and it just threw off the numbers, and it took multiple different books. But I kept track of which ones had how many, and I made sure that eventually they all got the same number again. So the other two focus options you can get as a ranger are Peacekeeper, which we were talking about heavily earlier on, and it is a social based ranger. The problem there being that the ranger's social essence score progression is actually quite slow, and so the first couple of perks were supposed to solve that, and I kind of wish I got a second shot at explaining at fixing that because it's this weird give or take of like as long as you have ranks in persuasion and deception, then you can use culture instead of those. And yeah, I think that I should have just said you could use culture for persuasion or deception. Like just choose which way you want to go and use culture instead. It would have been a lot simpler. It would have meant that there was no reason to have anything in social, which does feel weird for the sociable role, which I think was the second part of that problem that I was trying to fix, like forcing you to actually invest in some social skills, but then not penalizing you for being a role that is not social by by its progression. Um, yeah, I think I overcomplicated it. I think there is a more elegant solution to that. In fact, I even might have suggested one on the Renegade Discord.
Well, there's always going to be another book. Maybe you can take a look at different ways to
It's
address that in.
it would be weird to say like this one option from this far from core book. Here's a different take on it. Like it I don't know. Maybe. And then the other role, or sorry, the other focus option, probably the one I forget the most. Oh, sorry, I forgot about the Cobra ones. Anyway, we'll go back to them in a second. Is the Disruptor. This is the one in Quartermaster's Guide to Gear. So every role got a new focus option in Quartermaster's Guide to Gear, and the idea was that I didn't want too many of them to just be, and now you're the technological version of that role. So some of them are the anti-tech versions of that role, and that is what the Ranger ended up being. The Ranger is the one that uses the simple weapons to take out the higher technology. Um, it's not it's not the best Ranger focus option. It's not super exciting, but if that is your concept, it fills that niche.
And it hits that little space. I know that I think it was Jinx that did it in the cartoon where, and I think Wildcard did it on the thing where you just touch something and it falls apart. That's a funny characterization. There's also a similar class in Shadowrun where the Shaman class has one where they just simply they walk into the room and the computers stop working. And so I think that that can be a very interesting character in the right type of campaign. In the Energon protocols, being able to disrupt the technology of the giant robots that are about to squish you can be a really powerful piece. So it is situational, but it can be pretty fun.
We are doing those special missions and need backup characters. Maybe like this episode made me think, I haven't played a ranger yet. I should really get around to that. And Disruptor is not the direction I would have gone, but you may have convinced me to give it a try.
It's certainly you're spoiled for choice as to what to specialize in with a ranger because it can go practically anywhere. But I think that the special conditions that disruptor would be the best possible pick in exist within the Energon protocols. So have at her.
All right, and I've just decided to open up Cobra Codex, so give me a second while I move over to Ranger because I want to just be a little more specific. So the two Ranger focus options in Cobra Codex are the Firestarter and the Guerrilla. So Firestarter has an interesting history in that it was originally outlined for the core rulebook. It was something that I'd written up and like was before, or sorry, I hadn't written it up, but I knew the direction I wanted to go with it. And then in speaking with Ben and Paige, the other designers on that book, Ben said, well, what GI Joe is this, would this help you create? And it made me realize that I have made a good functional role for this game system, but it doesn't really fit in this universe. And so when then I was outlining, it's the fire specialist ranger.
Blowtorch?
What?
Blowtorch?
So he's more of a technician or infantry with a blowtorch. Like other than the fire part of it, like it needed to be both fire and ranger.
Hmm.
And so I realized, yeah, you know what? I put it aside. I don't remember which one of the ones that are in the core rulebook wasn't in there. Beastmaster was definitely in there, so I think it might have been Predator was the one that replaced Firestarter. But then when I was outlining Cobra Codex, I realized like Torch, the Dreadnought, is a lot closer to this Ranger meets Fire. He's still more like a renegade, but at least he was close enough that now I could justify including the Firestarter because I really did think it was fun to have a fire specialist, and I think the rules fit nicely into how Essence 20 just how Essence 20 works. And because we were still so new to the system, it was nice whenever I would design something and feel like, oh, I get it, like I'm one with the system with this choice.
And I think that it helps you build the incinerator, which would be an urban ranger type that is really focused on being able to
It's
burn stuff.
I didn't think of Incinerator as a ranger, but Urban Ranger does make it that's a solid argument that Incinerator could count as an Urban Ranger. All right, and then we've got the Guerrilla, which gives you animal-like natural attacks. It lets you temporarily gain mutations, which are introduced in the Cobra Codex, but you're not actually mutating. You're just like tapping into your inner beast, and it's called, of course, Beast Mode. And you can spend your adaptation points to get mutations. So this is something that could not have been in the core rulebook because that subsystem didn't exist yet. And it's always fun when you introduce a new subsystem into a book to find some ways that really exploit that subsystem. And so yeah, it's not far off from the niche of Predator in that it is a very combat focused one, although it's not so much sneaky as it is very aggressive.
It's not sneaky, it's freaky.
Ooh, I like it.
I must admit, when I read it, I was not expecting what it was based on the name. I was thinking about guerrilla warfare, but
Yes.
I think it is spelt differently anyway. So I should have.
No, it is spelt like guerrilla warfare, which, is not spelt like gorilla the animal. It's spelt like guerre, the French word for war, which I think it might be a mashup of those two terms. I don't know the etymology of guerrilla. It would probably be Spanish, just knowing just what I believe I know about the origin of where the fighting technique came from. And of course, Spanish and French, both Latin languages, so it probably still relates back to guerre. But yeah, I was more doing a play on words of it being the guerrilla ranger rather than the guerrilla.
All right.
But it's not far off of guerrilla warfare. It's just very specific in how it implements the idea of the more hit and run sabotage tactics.
Well, whenever I think of guerrilla warfare, because of you, I think immediately Ewoks.
Perfect.
Yeah, I wouldn't have used that before, but now that is my go-to for explaining what guerrilla warfare is Ewoks.
So that's the ranger. That's the ranger. That's all of its focus options. A role that I have not played, outside of like playtesting in narrow scenarios. And I know I've made pre-gens for all of the different roles, I can't even remember what direction I went with the Ranger. So I really think that the next time I roll up a new character, it has to be a Ranger, just to remind myself of this awesome class and all of its customizing potential. Speaking of builds, we're going to move on to the shout outs. And like I
Yeah.
said recently, I'm going to try and shout out to my most recent essential builds every time. And this one kind of ties into the Ranger. So all right, this takes some explaining because it is not a pop culture character. It is analog, which is basically what if Soundwave was wood. And the reason that I decided to make this character for this week, even though I rarely make original characters for essential builds, is that in the last episode of No Direction, or the last segment, the first segment of the most recent episode, I decided I would take the Bestiary 2, the Monster Core 2, and I would randomly pick a monster and then tell you how to build a story around it. And I randomly picked the Ambush Cops, which is just a pile of wood or it is an elemental that embodies a pile of wood, waits for you to get close, pops up, and then starts attacking you. And I just happened to have written an adventure that I was planning on running for the Renegade Discord mods, where Analog, this log that's actually a transformer,
Just got the joke.
yeah. Yeah, so that was the entire scenario. So I even admitted after randomly rolling it, it's like, I feel like I'm cheating because I already have the scenario planned out, but it was fully random. Like, there are 300 monsters in that book, and only one of them was exactly like this Transformer character that I made. So I recorded that episode, and then my next, site-related thing, No Direction-related thing, was an essential builds, and I was like, I don't have anything on my mind right now except Analog, who I haven't thought about since January. So why not? Because I already had the picture of Soundwave, but with wood texture and with a log for a face. So yeah, I just had fun saying like, I don't know about this character, and now we have to build him. So let's just go on a journey. And it ended up once again being a very fun character that I imagine I would like to play.
I am fascinated by the idea of a creature that specifically preys upon people who most likely are carrying an axe.
Yes, well, if you look at, he's got a chainsaw built into his wrist and a wood chipper on his
Uh,
shoulder. And mechanically, what did I do? I did something where he can improvise weapons. And my thinking was that he ambushes loggers and then uses their tools against them.
nice. Has
And
an
I,
environmental angle to it that I like as well.
so yeah, in the building of this character, who again had no personality, his personality was log. But in the building of him, I came across the idea that maybe he's an environmentalist and that he is kind of the Decepticon's version of Poison Ivy. Only instead of poisoning people, he feeds them through his wood chipper.
That is a slightly different approach, yeah, but I would likely to be well, not necessarily making the Saturday morning cartoons, but certainly effective.
So I will not be making an original character for next essential build. In fact, I already know broadly what I'm going to be doing. Running Man is coming out in theaters today, as of not recording, but as of the release of this episode. And the 80s version of Running Man was a movie that I liked fine as a kid and then revisited as a teen or a young adult. And I was like, this movie's amazing. It's way smarter than I had any idea. And in fact, on the DVD, back when DVDs were full of special features, there's like a 1 hour documentary of the director just talking about, like, basically predicting social media and reality TV. And it's like, why is this on this Running Man DVD? Like, I get the connection, and yet, like, this is very heavy additional content for this Arnold Schwarzenegger action movie. But anyway, I love Running Man. I don't think the new one is going to hit the same like social commentary as the original. So I've decided I'm going to build something based on the original Running Man to tie into the new movie. And I decided that the stalkers, so the people, the gladiators within the game, the ones that are hunting the runners, they're all big, bombastic. They all have very clear weapons that I know how I would build. And so I leave it to you people that want to post in the comments on our YouTube video or go to our Discord and share your comments. Which of the stalkers would you like me to build? Just to remind you, there's Captain Freedom, who we never actually see fight. This is Jesse Ventura's character, who was like the retired stalker who was doing the backstage interviews. but I still think we've got enough idea about what he does and how he fights from like the flashbacks and whatnot, that if he's the one that gets picked, I can definitely see how he would do it. Fireball has a jetpack and a flamethrower. Relatable, although ground I've already covered. Buzzsaw has a chainsaw. Yeah, well, I don't remember Buzzsaw as well. Dynamo was the
My
opera
favorite,
singing
though.
lightning shooter. What's that?
Like, how can you not love the opera singing lightning shooter?
I've seen the argument that everyone else is pretty straightforward. Where does the opera singing come in for Dynamo? But I like it just fine. I would get to use options that I do not have an excuse to use normally. So I would be more than happy to make Dynamo. And then finally, Sub-Zero, just plain zero. It's kind of unfortunate that the most memorable thing about Sub-Zero, I guess his scythe hockey stick was pretty cool, but otherwise it's when he got killed, he had Arnold's best bad line in the movie. Also, funny enough, there were 2 action figures in the original G.I. Joe line that named Sub-Zero. Oh no, the Mortal Kombat line was not officially tied to the G.I. Joe line, but there are 2 Sub-Zeros in G.I. Joe, or of the body construction. Anyway, I'm trying to make some kind of trivia connection, and it's just not happening.
And
So
none of them had a hockey stick, frankly. So
I know, what the heck.
really, there is so much left on the cutting room floor there that they could have done.
So just to reiterate, if you have a preferred stalker or one that you'd like to see me build, comment in the comments of this video or find us on Discord. I'm not doing any kind of formal points tracking. I'm just going to get the vibes of what people say. If somebody makes a good argument for Buzzsaw and nobody else votes for Buzzsaw, if it's a good enough argument, I might go that direction. So if you have strong feelings about Buzzsaw or any of the other Running Man stalkers, you let me know in the comments.
I vote Team Dynamo, but you know, I'm interested in seeing the I'm interested in seeing the what the viewers and listeners have to comment for the show. Thank you, by the way, with the engagement's been way up. I feel just better about myself in general.
Oh,
And it's really nice to be able to see it. This episode is a good example of how you can affect what it is that you hear on the podcast or see on the YouTube channel. And we're hoping that more engagement comes in because it's really hard to come up with good ideas sometimes. And y'all have a whole bunch of them. And so if you share them, we're totally going to do them. So we thank you and the algorithm thanks you.
you've got a couple of other things on the shoutouts here.
I do, and I'm getting up to the one that I teased last time. But first, I want to talk about the G.I. Joe Headcast. Once again, the Energon Protocols is getting really good. If you haven't heard the last one, it's one of the better ones, and we're leading up to perhaps my favorite episode in the entirety of the run so far. But the other thing I wanted to talk about is the thing that's on my background. The Universe Awaiting is my new retro toy and RPG company. And we do blind bagged G.I. Joe and Transformer figures. So you can go in and if you don't want to spend a lot of money, but you want to get something interesting, you can spend $5 on a bag. You don't know what you're going to get and get 2 figures and walk away with them. That'll be interesting. We're also booking custom RPG sessions for things like bachelor parties and bachelorettes and other experiences. So it's really about making sure that people can experience things the 1980s and 90s gave us, the toys and RPGs that gave us joy. So we'll be at the Kitchener-Waterloo Toy Show on November 23rd, and you can check out more information, including links to this show, on the universeawaiting. Sorry, let's try that again. The universeawaiting.ca. Yeah, I promoted something. I feel so excited. It's the first time I've actually been able to do that.
I forgot that you teased it last time, and now, well played.
You gotta pay off the tease. That's just, you have to. That's the thing.
So thank you for joining us for episode 54 of Upshift. If you'd like to hear other great gaming podcasts or see our other gaming content, you can go to nodirectionpodcast.com. And if you really like what you see, you can go to patreon.com/nodirection and show us your support, financially. Also, thank you for Word Burglar. Thank you to Word Burglar for the use of Letters from Snake Eyes Part 4. You can find out more at wordburglar.com. Until next time, I'm Ryan Costello.
And I'm Charles Cushman.
This has been Upshift.